Renia Lewis was gone missing on Friday, and they discovered her body yesterday, which was Tuesday, here at this home. Found her body, I guess, supposedly in the attic, dead. This is so sad. This is a very sad situation. Very sad situation. I guess that's a family member right there. Lost a loved one. This is so sad. The Vallejo police. If it wasn't for our friends and family coming in here to do the police work, I'm not sure how long this baby would have been in this house. I'm gonna take you over here so you can notice this door at the top.
On September 28, 2025, 28-year-old Renia Lewis vanished from the streets of Vallejo, California, leaving an unanswered question. How does a swift disappearance trigger a deeper horror? Her phone pinged near a residence on 14th Street, but the first search of the property turned up nothing. No sign of Renia, no clue. Days later, a statewide alert was issued. Investigators returned with a warrant, and behind a concealed access point in an attic, they found her remains. A local man, later charged, reportedly confessed.
The last location was here, and her last location pinged right here, but we still looked in the area. We looked in garbage cans. We looked everywhere.
Jakeem Green says his family's been looking for his cousin, Renia Lewis, since she was reported missing on Sunday. On Tuesday came news that her body was found at this house.
The reaction is just distraught. I was distraught, confused, lost, hopeless.
Neighbors say the house has been boarded up for a long time. Police say the suspect lived in a detached unit in the backyard.
With a search warrant, we were able to do a thorough search, and we located Miss Lewis inside the residence.
In a statement to ABC 7 News, the Vallejo Police Department confirmed that the suspect did confess to killing Miss Lewis. Lewis's body was found behind a concealed entry to the home's attic. Family members believe she was brought here against her will.
If she was to see the house, she's not going to come in. She's not going to do that. So I feel like she was either drugged or under some type of influence or something.
Green says Lewis was in Vallejo on Sunday to visit family. They still don't know how she ended up at this house, and they say she did not know the suspect.
I feel like she got her conscience back, and she was fighting for her life. Windows were busted. She was trying to get away and escape.
It's really sad, and it's really scary for a lot of these young ladies out here on the streets of Vallejo. Vallejo's a small community, so it really shook the whole community up.
All day, nearby residents came by to pay their respects.
I wouldn't want to find my daughter like that. You know, we all have children in this world, whether they're grown or little. As a parent, you wouldn't want to find your children like that. So I feel more for the family, the mother, her loss.
The suspect is expected to be in court on Thursday.
This is not just a murder story. It is the opening of the lid on a hidden chamber, where ordinary walls held extraordinary darkness, and every evasive step in those hours became a piece of a terrifying puzzle. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Renia Lewis was a 28-year-old woman from Northern California, described by those who knew her as soft-spoken, respectful, and deeply connected to her family. She was born and raised in Vallejo, where she shared a close bond with her mother, Terry Lewis, and her cousin, Latoya Lewis, both of whom describe her as the family's gentle soul. Those around Renia often said she had an aura of peace, the kind of calm that drew people in. She was the type of daughter who never failed to check in. Every evening, she'd call or text her mom before bed, a simple routine that became a comforting constant in their lives. She had no criminal record, no known enemies, and no involvement in any risky circles. Her co-workers describe her as grounded and punctual, someone who valued structure and safety. Renia wasn't a person who sought attention or lived recklessly. She kept her circle small and her privacy guarded. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she appeared to be in good spirits. She was looking forward to her 29th birthday, planning to celebrate quietly with family. Friends recall her mentioning meeting someone near 14th Street on the evening of September 27, 2025, though she didn't specify who or why. That would be the last evening anyone heard her voice. September 27, 2025, Friday, Renia made her routine evening phone call to her mother around 9:30 p.m. Sounding calm and normal, she mentioned she was stepping out briefly to meet someone. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. September 28th, Terry noticed Renia didn't call or text that morning. Multiple calls went unanswered throughout the day. By nightfall, her phone was completely unreachable. September 29th, the family officially filed a missing persons report with Vallejo Police Department after 48 hours with no contact. Vallejo PD began canvassing her neighborhood and known hangout spots. Officers visited her apartment and confirmed there were no signs of forced entry or struggle. Renia's car was still parked outside, keys and personal items inside. Her bank account showed no new activity, and her phone remained offline. Her family, unsatisfied with the slow pace of the search, launched their own investigation. They used phone location tracking, retraced her last known routes, and distributed missing person flyers across Vallejo and Stockton. By using location pings through Find My iPhone, relatives traced her phone to an unusual spot, the roof of a nearby elementary school. The discovery immediately raised suspicion. Investigators theorized the phone may have been tossed intentionally to delay tracing. It was damaged but intact enough to confirm it had last pinged from near 14th Street, aligning with the area she was reportedly headed that night. Based on the phone data, officers visited a residence on 14th Street, believed to be the location of her last digital signal. Residents appeared cooperative and calm, claiming they didn't know anyone named Renia. Officers conducted a limited search, but without clear signs of foul play or probable cause, they couldn't legally inspect hidden areas of the home. As days passed, her family's fear turned to desperation. Volunteers joined search efforts. Local activists began circulating her story online, and petitions to the Ebony Alert, California's new alert system for missing black women, began to gain traction. The alert was officially issued by the California Highway Patrol, broadcasting Renia's photo and vehicle details statewide. The activation brought immediate media attention and drew comparisons to other high-profile missing persons cases. News outlets began questioning whether the police response had been too slow, given the early signs of potential foul play. With renewed pressure and fresh tips from the public, investigators re-examined the 14th Street address. New cell tower data revealed Renia's phone had remained stationary in that vicinity for several hours before being moved, matching the time she stopped responding to messages. Detectives gathered enough circumstantial evidence, including witness statements from neighbors who reported hearing noises on the night of her disappearance. These developments allowed police to secure a full search warrant for the home. During the execution of the warrant, investigators noticed inconsistencies in the home structure, an attic space with an unusual wall partition. Behind that false wall in a concealed crawl space, they made a chilling discovery: the remains of Renia Lewis. The positioning of the remains, along with the deliberate concealment, indicated a calculated effort to hide the body. Crime scene technicians described the hiding spot as one of the most concealed and deliberately hidden spaces they had ever encountered. Withheld specific findings, early reports suggested signs of deliberate concealment rather than a spontaneous act. The scene lacked signs of struggle, suggesting the crime occurred elsewhere before her body was brought there. Some sources close to the case mentioned possible dismemberment, but authorities did not confirm the extent of the remains publicly. Following the discovery, Vallejo Police Chief described the case as heinous and senseless. The area surrounding the 14th Street residence was sealed off as forensic teams processed evidence for over 24 hours. Items of interest were collected, including cleaning materials, tools, and electronic devices. The news broke nationally within hours. Crowds gathered outside the home, demanding justice. Reporters described the discovery as a turning point in the ongoing crisis of missing black women in California, a case that forced renewed scrutiny of how quickly law enforcement responds to such disappearances. Douglas Irwin Shaw is a 41-year-old male identified by Solano County law enforcement as the primary suspect in the death of Renia Lewis. Shaw was a local resident who lived alone in a detached unit on 14th Street, the same property where investigators later discovered Lewis's remains in a concealed attic space. He was arrested at his place of employment pursuant to an arrest warrant and was taken into custody without resistance. Law enforcement officials characterized his demeanor during detainment as detached and unemotional. Following arrest, Shaw was booked into the Solano County Jail on a single count of murder and held without bail pending further legal proceedings. Available public records and reporting do not establish a prior personal, familial, or romantic relationship between Shaw and the victim. Investigators reported no shared acquaintances or overlapping social circles evident from initial canvassing and interviews. Preliminary background checks and review of local criminal databases did not reveal a widely known history of violent crime attached to Shaw's name. He has been described in reporting as a low-profile individual with limited prior public record. At the time of arrest, no documented history of domestic complaints or prior allegations linking him to similar conduct had been disclosed by officials. Shaw's arrest followed the discovery of physical evidence at the 14th Street property that tied the location to Lewis's disappearance. After investigators obtained a search warrant based on accumulated investigative leads, they executed a full search of property and located a concealed attic compartment where Lewis's body was recovered. Shaw was located and arrested at his workplace during a planned law enforcement operation. He did not resist arrest and was transported to custody. Following booking procedures, prosecutors filed a murder charge. Shaw remains held pending arraignment and subsequent pretrial proceedings. Post-arrest statements reported in media outlets indicate that Shaw provided a statement in which he admitted responsibility for the act that resulted in Lewis's death. At present, prosecutors have not released a formal motive. Law enforcement sources and public court filings identified a confession as an evidentiary element that contributed to the charging decision, while ongoing investigation seeks to corroborate elements of that statement through forensic, digital, and physical evidence. Prosecutors have not publicly disclosed any assertion that Shaw and Lewis had a prior relationship to justify motive, and court documents available at the time of initial reporting do not list a motive as established fact. Concealment of the body within a modified section of the residence is a central investigative factor in this case. The attic where Lewis's remains were located was not accessible via an obvious entry point during the initial welfare check conducted by officers. Law enforcement returned to property after obtaining a search warrant and discovered a hidden access that led into an enclosed attic cavity. The concealment included construction features consistent with deliberate modification: a false wall, a camouflaged entry, and a concealed ladder or stair access point. Insulation and interior finishes masked interior surfaces and reduced immediate detectability. The configuration of the space limited air circulation and obscured visual and olfactory signs that might otherwise indicate the presence of a concealed body. From an investigative standpoint, the existence of a concealed compartment created specific procedural and evidentiary challenges. The initial cursory search of the residence did not reveal the hidden structure. Entry to concealed area required legal authorization and focused search techniques. Investigators documented construction details and photographed the false wall, framing, and interior access points. Forensic architects and crime scene reconstruction specialists were consulted to assess how the space had been built and modified, including an evaluation of whether modifications appear to be long-standing or recent. Those specialists also evaluated how concealment features could delay discovery and how structural elements could affect decomposition and evidence preservation. Forensic examination at the scene focused on trace evidence recovery, blood pattern documentation, and collection of material samples from surfaces within and adjacent to the concealed space. Crime scene technicians collected swabs from insulation, framing, and any tools or fasteners observed in the access area. Photographic and video records were made before and during evidence collection to preserve the spatial relationships in the attic. Bloodstain pattern analysis teams documented any visible blood transfer, pooling, or spatter consistent with the presence of trauma and subsequent concealment. The condition of the remains and surrounding materials were cataloged to establish a decomposition timeline and to estimate the approximate period during which the body had been inside the compartment. Autopsy procedures were completed by the county medical examiner to determine cause and manner of death. Official autopsy findings were not released publicly as of initial reporting, with authorities stating that the autopsy and toxicology results remain part of the ongoing investigative record. Law enforcement did, however, confirm that the medical examiner classified the death as a homicide. Specifics regarding traumatic injuries, presence of defensive wounds, or other direct indicators of cause were withheld pending completion of investigative and prosecutorial review. Biological evidence collected from the attic was submitted for laboratory analysis, including DNA profiling, serological testing, and trace fiber comparison. Technicians prioritized identification of DNA consistent with the victim for confirmation purposes, as well as any foreign DNA that could be linked to the suspect or other individuals. Swabs taken from tools, fasteners, and interior surfaces were processed to detect the presence of blood or other bodily fluids. Where possible, forensic analysts conducted tests to determine whether blood patterns indicated movement, staging, or post-mortem manipulation. Results of these analyses formed part of the prosecution's evidentiary case and were noted in subsequent affidavit materials used to maintain detention. Digital evidence formed a parallel investigative strand. Cell phone tower records and location triangulation placed the victim's mobile device in proximity to the 14th Street address within the relevant time window. Family members recovered the victim's phone from a nearby rooftop area, and forensic extraction specialists performed logical and physical acquisitions of the device to recover call logs, text messages, deleted content, and geolocation metadata. Analysts sought to recover deleted messages that could indicate the victim's final contacts or movements. Service provider records and tower pings were used to corroborate timeframes and the victim's last known location. Crime scene reconstruction included spatial modeling of the attic and 3D scanning of the compartment for use in legal filings and courtroom visualization. Reconstruction experts use a combination of scene measurements, photographic overlays, and 3D modeling to produce an evidentiary representation of the concealed space and its relationship to the rest of the dwelling. That model assisted investigators in evaluating possible entry routes, the logistics of moving a body into confined space, and the duration of occupancy given environmental conditions. Collectively, the suspect identification, the structural concealment, and the forensic evidence comprise the core of the investigative narrative being prepared for prosecution. Key investigative questions remaining to be addressed include the precise sequence of events leading to the victim's presence in the concealed attic, the full content and corroboration of the suspect's confession, and forensic confirmation of timing and cause of death. These elements will shape pretrial disclosure, prosecutorial strategy, and the presentation of physical and digital evidence in court. The discovery of 24-year-old Renia Lewis's body behind a false wall inside of Vallejo, California home sent shockwaves through her family and the community. For weeks, they had held on to hope that she would be found alive after her mysterious disappearance. The reality, however, was darker than anyone could have imagined. When the news reached her mother, she stood outside the coroner's office, trembling, her words echoing through the crowd of reporters and mourners. "My baby was hidden behind a wall." The statement captured both the horror and the disbelief surrounding the case. It was not only the manner of her death that devastated them. It was a deliberate concealment. Family members expressed outrage, not only at the suspect, but also how authorities handled the early stages of the investigation. They insisted that clues pointing toward foul play were overlooked and that their pleas for urgency went unanswered. In the first days following Renia's disappearance, her family tirelessly contacted police, shared flyers, and held press conferences. Each call to law enforcement, they said, was met with procedural responses instead of immediate action. They claimed that had police taken their fears seriously from the beginning, Renia might have been found before it was too late. As the story spread, Vallejo residents poured into the streets demanding accountability. Vigils were held across the city, with candlelight reflecting off handmade posters of Renia's smiling face. The phrase "hidden behind a wall" began circulating online, not just as a reference to the horrific discovery, but as a metaphor for the ways in which the voices of missing black women often go unheard. Community activists accused local law enforcement of negligence, citing repeated delays in responding to missing person reports involving young women of color. Demonstrators gathered in front of Vallejo Police Headquarters holding signs that read, "Justice for Renia and no more delays." At one rally, an organizer stated bluntly, if her name was different, if her skin was lighter, the search would have started the same night she disappeared. The growing public pressure pushed the department to release a timeline of their investigation, but many details only raised further questions. Why did it take so long for authorities to search the property where Renia's body was later discovered? How could she have been missing for weeks while located less than 3 miles from her home? The outrage intensified when it was revealed that the suspect, identified as Jason Shaw, a 37-year-old acquaintance of Renia, had already been interviewed once by detectives but was released due to insufficient evidence. Renia's case reignited debate about the Ebony Alert, a California alert system created to help locate missing black women and girls. Advocates argued that the system, while a step forward, failed to activate soon enough in Renia's case. By the time the alert went out, days had passed since her disappearance, a critical delay in cases of potential abduction. Activists, attorneys, and community leaders called for clearer activation criteria and improved coordination between departments. The family's attorney spoke at a public forum, explaining that Renia's disappearance fit the qualifications for an Ebony Alert on day one, yet bureaucracy slowed its use. Meanwhile, pressure grew for police procedure reform. Critics said detectives hesitated to issue warrants or conduct immediate searches, citing lack of probable cause, even though family members had provided detailed accounts of suspicious activity involving Shaw's residence. The tragedy became a turning point in public discussion about how slow responses and procedural hesitations can cost lives. One local columnist wrote, "Renia's story forces us to confront how many others could have been saved if urgency were not a privilege." In the aftermath, Renia's family made a public commitment. They would not let her name fade into the background of unsolved or forgotten cases. They vowed to keep her story alive and demand full accountability from both the perpetrator and the system that failed her. Her mother began laying groundwork for a potential foundation in Renia's name, one dedicated to helping other families navigate missing person investigations and push for faster police response. Plans included legal aid, rapid community mobilization networks, and awareness campaigns. At every vigil and public gathering, her family repeated one message: we're not just seeking justice for Renia, we're seeking change for everyone like her. This commitment drew national media coverage, sparking a wave of conversations about marginalized victims and systemic disparities in missing person reporting. Civil rights groups joined the cause, amplifying the family's efforts and connecting them to broader advocacy initiatives across the country. When Jason Shaw was arrested, the details sent shock and disgust throughout the community. Detectives reported finding Renia's body concealed within a false wall in the basement, covered behind newly installed drywall and insulation. Forensic investigators confirmed her identity through DNA testing. Shaw was formally charged with murder, concealment of a body, and obstruction of justice. During his initial arraignment, he stood silent as the prosecutor outlined the nature of the crime, describing it as a deliberate concealment of evidence and a calculated act intended to mislead investigators and delay discovery. The public defender assigned to Shaw deferred entering a plea pending further evidence review. Court filings noted that investigators have found digital traces linking Shaw to Renia's final movements, including surveillance footage and phone GPS records placing them together hours before her disappearance. The defense declined public comment, citing the ongoing investigation. However, sources close to the case suggested that Shaw might claim mental instability and attempt to argue diminished capacity. Prosecutors prepared for this possibility, collecting psychiatric evaluations and background records to challenge the claim. Prosecutors built their argument around a combination of forensic, digital, and physical evidence. DNA collected from inside the wall matched Renia's. Digital forensics showed that Shaw's phone was turned off for a 6-hour window on the night she vanished, a gap that coincided with the estimated time of death. Investigators also documented the construction materials used to seal the false wall, which had been purchased at a local hardware store just 2 days after Renia disappeared. Receipts and surveillance confirmed Shaw's presence there. Potential aggravating factors. Prosecutors intended to pursue the maximum possible sentence, citing aggravating factors including premeditation, concealment of evidence, and possible post-mortem mutilation. Court documents describe Shaw's actions as methodical and calculated, emphasizing the extensive measures he took to hide the crime. These factors could qualify the case for life imprisonment without parole. Court hearings. A pre-trial motion schedule was established, with hearings to determine the admissibility of evidence and the legality of the initial search that uncovered Renia's body. Defense attorneys questioned whether police had proper warrants for the second search, sparking legal debate over probable cause and the use of informant tips. The prosecution countered that exigent circumstances justified immediate entry, citing credible threats of evidence destruction. Public interest. By the time Shaw's case reached the courtroom, national media networks had picked it up. True crime podcasts and investigative journalists dissected every available detail. Legal analysts debated the implications of using hidden space evidence, walls, crawl spaces, and concealed compartments in criminal proceedings. The courtroom was packed at every hearing. Members of Renia's family attended daily, their presence a visible reminder of the human toll behind the headlines. The story of Renia Lewis forced public reflection on larger systemic issues that extend beyond one case. Renia's death underscored the persistent vulnerability of women, particularly women of color, to gender-based violence that often goes unnoticed until tragedy strikes. Advocacy groups use her case as an example of how disappearances are dismissed as runaways or personal disputes instead of potential crimes from the outset. Though the Ebony Alert eventually raised awareness of Renia's disappearance, it came too late to prevent her death. Experts argued that the delay in activation revealed weaknesses in how such systems are implemented. Lawmakers proposed revisions to make alerts automatic once certain criteria are met, reducing human delay. Internal reviews of the Vallejo Police Department found gaps in early investigative steps, including missed opportunities to secure search warrants and track digital evidence. The department publicly committed to revising missing person protocols and expanding specialized units for high-risk cases. The intense media coverage of Renia's case reflected how public engagement can sustain pressure and accountability. Without viral attention, many fear her story might have faded into another unsolved disappearance. Community networks became an essential force in maintaining visibility. Renia's case revealed the chilling reality of hidden crimes in ordinary homes. The idea that someone could live within a neighborhood, surrounded by neighbors, while concealing a body behind a wall, created widespread fear. It illustrated how violence can exist quietly behind locked doors and fresh paint. The broader cultural discussion centered on how race, gender, and class shape media and police responses to missing persons. Activists stressed that Renia's story was not isolated. It was a symptom of systemic neglect towards certain victims. The tragedy became a catalyst for a growing movement demanding equal urgency for all cases. Months after the arrest, the case remained pending trial. The investigation closed several procedural gaps, but left critical questions unanswered. What truly brought Renia to that house? What motivated Shaw? Were there earlier warning signs missed by police or the community? While the legal process moved forward, Renia's story continued to circulate as a symbol of both tragedy and transformation. Her name appeared in legislative hearings, advocacy panels, and reform proposals. Her family's foundation officially launched 6 months later, focusing on providing legal assistance and public awareness tools for families of missing women. As the public awaited the outcome of the trial, one phrase from her mother lingered, a reminder of both grief and determination. Some crimes hide behind locked doors, others behind walls no one thought to look behind. Renia's legacy became one of vigilance, a warning that what's hidden is not always gone, only waiting to be found. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.